For the longest time, reading felt like something that I should do. But in 2025, I actually started reading again for fun. And yeah, let's go over that. Hey, BookTube, welcome back. It's a new year. Hopefully you guys had a good New Year's. I know a lot of you are gonna have some TBR lists. I have a lot planned this year for my reading and for my writing. But before we get into all that, I kind of wanted to take a moment to look back on 2025 and the books that I read and kind of share that with you guys. So before we dive into 2025, I do want to say in 2024, I was actively reading, but then I was reading more nonfiction, self-help, business books, things like The One Thing, Never Split the Difference, and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F***. While it was great, I did a lot of reading. It was more for learning or to grow in my business rather than reading for enjoyment. So then Christmas of 2024, my mom actually got me this book for Christmas, Along Came a Spider by James Patterson. This is the first book in the Alex Cross series. And in fact, James Patterson is her favorite author. And when I opened this up on Christmas, it kind of reminded me of how much I do enjoy reading and how I kind of fell out of that slump. So in 2025, I made a conscious decision that I was going to go back to reading for enjoyment again. And that's what I did. You know, it wasn't about the numbers. It wasn't about how many books I can read per month. I just wanted to read for enjoyment again. I wanted to have fun and pick books that I like and read them and enjoy them and talk about them, which is something that inspired me to really start this channel. In fact, I think my mom had kind of got in a reading slump as well. And, my whole life growing up, she was an avid reader. So, she kind of joined me this year and we decided, in fact, to start a book club together. And so in our book club, we mainly read, mysteries and thrillers, but it was a way for me to, keep going and have someone to talk to about books, and same for her. And, she pick a book, I pick a book, we kind of go back and forth, and it gave us something to talk about. And it's been really fun, and it's really got me back into reading and, kind of kick-started this, reading journey and, even partly this channel. So that brings us to 2025. Now, I did set a reading goal for myself. I wanted to read 12 books this past year, one per month. Now, I didn't hit that goal. I only read 10 books this year, but that's okay. And part of the reason for that is because I was working on my debut novel. If you watch my last video, I kind of go into detail about that and how long that took and the process. So, while I was working on the book, I read a little bit, but not a ton. So, and that's okay. Like I said, it wasn't about the numbers for me, and I'm not like mad at myself that I didn't hit that 12. Like I said, it's not about the numbers. I think it's more important if someone read one book in a year and they really liked it and they enjoyed it than someone that's like, I read, 80 books this year and I don't remember any of them. Then what's the point? So I'm not going to do any deep dive reviews here today. I do plan on doing some reviews of these books later on this channel. But today I kind of just wanted to give you a brief description of what the book's about, my thoughts on it, and give you some recommendations. And boy, oh boy, did I read some good books this year. I'm excited to tell you guys about it. I was excited at the end of the year to make this video. When I started this channel, I knew I was going to be able to talk about the books that I read this year, and I read some freaking good books this year. I'm excited to talk about it. So the first book that I read last year was 4 Past Midnight by Stephen King. 4 Past Midnight, it's a collection of 4 psychological novellas by Stephen King. So the first one is The Langoliers, the second one is Secret Window, Secret Garden, the third one is The Library Policeman, and the fourth one is The Sundog. The Langoliers is about a group of travelers that experience a flight delay that drops them into a version of the world where time itself has seemed to stop. This was adapted to a movie, I think, in the 90s, and that's the images I'm showing you on the screen right now. The next story is Secret Window, Secret Garden, and it's about a writer who is accused of stealing a story. And then the story kind of slowly turns into something that's really dark. There's some twists. I don't want to give anything away, but this one was also turned into a movie, and it was actually starring Johnny Depp. And I also seen the movie, and movie's great. The next short story is The Library Policeman, and it's about a man's forgotten childhood memory. It kind of resurfaces, and he's reminded of this overdue library book that leads into this like deeply unsettling past. It's probably the darkest story of all of these. And the last story is The Sundog, and it's about this like strange camera that starts producing photos that really shouldn't even exist, and each picture makes reality feel a little bit more unstable. So overall, I really did like this collection of short stories. I don't think this one gets talked about as much as some of Stephen King's other short stories. Now, I would say out of the 4 stories, I think The Langoliers and Secret Window, Secret Garden is my 2 favorite. Especially Secret Window. That twist, did not see it coming, was great. So if you've never read Stephen King before, I wouldn't recommend starting with this one, but if you've read a couple of his books, I would definitely pick this up and check it out. All right, so the next book that I read after 4 Past Midnight was actually The Sisters Brothers by Patrick DeWitt. Now, I don't have a physical copy of this book because I actually read it on the Kindle app on my iPad. So The Sisters Brothers, it's like a dark comedy western, and it's about these 2 hired killers, Eli and Charlie, and they are hired to, you know, kill this guy who's essentially, you know, going against their boss, and he's a prospector. I don't want to go into too much detail. I don't want to spoil anything. It's a good book. You should check it out. It was also turned into a movie starring John C. Reilly and Joaquin Phoenix. Again, I really did enjoy this novel. This was my first Western, and it was funny. Like, there was parts of this book that like genuinely had me laughing out loud. And it also kind of gave you that like nostalgic, you know, the good old days of America. So I would say if you've never read a Western before, I would definitely check this out. You know, a lot of people, when they hear Western, they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with it. But this one was really cool, and I really enjoyed it. And I did watch the movie. I did like the movie, but of course I had read the book first, and I thought the book was way better. After that, the next book that I read, which is actually a manga, is Berserk by Kentaro Miura. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Berserk is a dark fantasy that follows Guts, and he's like a lone mercenary navigating through this like brutal world filled with violence and demons and war, and he carries this mysterious past and also this massive sword. And as the story unfolds, it explores, you know, fate and trauma and ambition and what it means to keep going in a world that's so cruel. Now, I haven't finished the entire series, but I have read a good chunk of it. I think there's like 43, 44 volumes total. But what I will tell you is that I don't recommend it to everyone. It is very dark. I mean, very dark. It is, there's some scenes that are really just hard to read. And in fact, I would say that Guts, the main character, has probably the most tragic story that I've ever read in anything ever. That being said, it's the best manga that I've ever read, and most people consider it to be the greatest manga of all time ever. This was also adapted into an anime, which I was showing the screenshots on the screen, and it was done into an anime later, but the CGI was bad. We're not going to get into that. But if you want to watch the 90s anime, it's also really good. But again, the manga's better. I think if you're someone who's really into dark fantasy, or if you play games like Dark Souls, then this is right up your alley. If that kind of stuff's not your shindig, you know, maybe pass on this one. But all in all, it is a great manga. It's a great book. Berserk, yeah. After that, the next book that I read is The Maid by Nita Prose. This is a mystery novel, and it was actually the first book that me and my mom read in our book club. The Maid is a cozy mystery, and it's about Molly. She's like this socially awkward hotel maid who finds herself in the center of this murder investigation after she discovers a body in one of the rooms. And, you know, then she has to kind of navigate in this world and try to, you know, solve this mystery. When I started the book club with my mom, I wanted to read a mystery, so I was kind of like Googling like best mysteries, and this one just kept coming up on every single list. It's a short read. It's not a very big book, and I think you could read this in a day or two, easily read it in a weekend, and it's really good. It's cozy. It's nothing too crazy. It's not gory. It's not gross. It's just, you know, this maid in this hotel trying to solve this mystery. Now, I don't know if she, you know, is like, she's autistic or whatnot, but she does have like, she's, you know, a little socially awkward, but she's really smart, and you know, she kind of sees things and figures stuff out. But yeah, it's just a really good book. I highly recommend it. If you like mysteries at all and you haven't read this one, definitely pick it up. And if you're new to mysteries and you want to know where you start, I think this is a good one to pick up. So after that, it was my mom's choice to pick in the book club, and she picked Face of Death. And this is by Blake Pierce, and this is a thriller. Let me tell you about this. So Face of Death is this fast-paced crime thriller that follows this serial killer investigation, you know, focusing on the profiling and patterns and the race to the next stop before, you know, the murder happens. Probably out of all the books that I've read this past year, this is like a real page turner. You know, it's this cat and mouse. You get to kind of see from the perspective of the detective, you get to see from the perspective of the killer, and you know, she is trying to catch him, so it's just, you know, one after another after another. It's kind of like edge of your seat thriller. What's going to happen next? Is she going to catch him, kind of thing. So actually, funny enough, similar to the Maid, Zoe, the main character in this book, she is gifted with numbers. I mean, you can kind of see all the numbers on the book cover here. And she's a little socially awkward, but she's really smart, and she can kind of see patterns that your average person couldn't see. So, you know, the serial killer, he's like, it seems random that he's, you know, committing these acts of violence, and he's doing it every day, but they're all in different locations at different times with different weapons, with different things. And it seems like all these other detectives just can't figure it out. There's no pattern to it, but she sees the pattern. And, you know, like I said, very short book. I would pick this up if you're into thrillers, detective crime novels. This is a great one. It's fast-paced, and if you like this book, this is actually just the first book in the series. It's a whole entire series. Highly recommend it. After that, we come to Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now this one, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you already know about it. This book is insanely popular. You can go anywhere, Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, doesn't matter. You are gonna see this on the shelves. This book is very, very popular. Verity is this psychological thriller that's about the struggling writer who's hired to finish this best-selling author series, only to uncover like disturbing secrets about the author and her family while she's living in the home. I thought Verity was great, but this book, and more so than any book, you know, on this list that I read this year, is very divisive. I mean, you can go on YouTube right now and search a review for this book, and you're gonna see people giving it 5 out of 5 stars. And then you'll see videos where people are saying it's terrible. They gave it a 1-star, worst book they ever read. For me personally, I really liked it. I mean, I think Colleen Hoover really pushes the boundaries and the limits here of, you know, taking you right on the edge to where some things are you know, pretty uncomfortable to read. But I think there's twists and turns. Out of every book that I read this year, this one has the most like, I have to know what's gonna happen next. While the Face of Death that I was talking about is very fast-paced, cat and mouse, it's kind of that rush to the end, like a rush thriller. This doesn't have that kind of rush, but while you're reading this, you're like, I have to know what's next. And in fact, even the people who gave this book a 1-star was like, I finished it because I had to know what happened. I had to know what happened. So I have to give it to Colleen for that, because once she, you know, ropes you in, you're in for the ride, you know, whether you like that ride or not. But, you know, fortunately, I did like the ride. I do like this book, and, you know, I recommend it. After that, I read Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Let me tell you, this is such a good book. After I read this book, I was recommending it to everyone. I was telling my friends, I was telling my parents. I could not shut up. I was like, read this book. Red Rising is this dystopian sci-fi novel that's set on this divided society on Mars, where people are separated by this color-based society. And it follows this young man, Darrow, and he's from the lower class, and he, you know, infiltrates the ruling elite and attempts to, you know, dismantle them from the inside. For me, this was a very strong contender for my book of the year. You know, this book gets compared a lot to The Hunger Games or to Maze Runner, and I definitely can see that, and I imagine he took inspiration from that. But this is much more adult. It goes much more in depth. And the funny thing was, like, this book is not a thriller, but it had so many plot twists. I mean, I think like chapter 4, there's a plot twist, then like chapter 6, and then chapter 10. I remember at one point I was talking to my friend who was reading this book, and we were about halfway through, and I'm like, dude, how many plot twists have there been already? It kind of reminded me of Game of Thrones. Again, I'm not going to give any spoilers. I'm not going to go into a deep dive. I will do a review on this book, and I will give all the spoilers and deep dive on there. But if you have not read this book, pick it up, read it. It is so good. I promise you, you will like it. Also, so this book is a trilogy. I have the second book here. I do plan to read that very soon, and then I'm going to read the third one. And then, in fact, I think there's 3 more books after that if you like the core trilogy where he kind of continued the story. After I read Red Rising, which was a 5 out of 5 book, I read The Whisper Man. And again, just like Red Rising, this was a 5 out of 5 book. It was great. In fact, I actually borrowed this book from the library and read it, and it was so good that I bought a copy because I was like, I'm gonna read that again. It was really good. The Whisper Man is a dark thriller by Alex North, and it's about this father and son who move into a small town with a disturbing past where this convicted serial killer known as the Whisper Man might be connected to the new disappearance of a child. I love this book. It gave me that like Silence of the Lambs feel, but also that, true crime detective feel. This book I think is like 400 and something pages, and I read the last 200 pages in one sitting. Like, I could not put this thing down. I think one thing that I really liked about this book is that you get multiple point of views, which is how I wrote my novel. And I like that. I do like Tom, the dad in this book. I think Jake, the son, he has very interesting perspective. But by far, my favorite character was Pete. And, he's a really tragic character. Now, this book has been picked up by Netflix. They are turning it into a movie, and it's going to be starring Robert De Niro. So I've already read the book. I'm excited to see the movie. Hopefully it's just as good. And if you want to read the book, I highly suggest it. If not, you can wait and check the movie out when it comes out on Netflix this year. Up next, I read Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. Razorblade Tears is this gritty crime novel about these 2 fathers, one black, one white, Ike and Buddy Lee. And they're from 2 very different backgrounds, but they're both, ex-convicts. And they team up together to seek justice after their sons, who were gaily married, were murdered. And this forces them to confront violence and grief and their own prejudice along the way. So this book, just like the last 2 that I said, is a 5 out of 5 perfect story. It's amazing. It is an emotional roller coaster all the way through, and I highly suggest this book for everybody. I think if you're a parent, this book will hit hard. I think if you're, a son, this book will hit hard. So sometimes this book can be funny. I mean, one of the main characters, Buddy Lee, is my favorite. He is hysterical. Had me rolling multiple times. I mean, this book will make you laugh. It will make you nervous. It will make you cry. Yes, I cried reading this book. On the surface, this book is about fathers seeking revenge for their sons. But at the core, this book is really about fathers learning to love their sons. This book is incredible. S.A. Cosby is amazing. Pick this book up, read it, read it, read it. In fact, I have another book by him, All the Sinners Bleed, that I'm planning to read this year as well. And I'm probably going to read all of his books. One last tidbit, when I was working on my novel, A Pedal Through Stone, I had sent it out to beta readers just to kind of get their opinions and, reviews and thoughts of the book. And one of the beta readers got back to me and was like, you remind me so much of S.A. Cosby. And that's actually how I found out about him and why I ended up picking up, Razorblade Tears. But, which amazing compliment. I don't think I'm anywhere near the genius of S.A. Cosby, but I do see this, similar kind of styles of the, crime and themes and that kind of stuff. So I thought that was an amazing compliment, and, that's how I found out about S.A. Cosby. But like I said, everyone pick this book up, read it. It's so good. No matter what genre you like, you will like this book. So the last book that I read of the year, but definitely not the least, was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This book, again, I think a lot like Verity, is very popular. I'm sure you've heard of this book, and the reason why this book is so popular is because of the ending. The Silent Patient is a psychological thriller, and it's about this famous painter who murders her husband, and then suddenly she stops talking. So years later, this therapist becomes obsessed with uncovering the truth, behind her silence. So this book is a slow burn. You know, unlike The Face of Death or Verity, this book I don't think is something that you're going to pick up and just be hooked at immediately. This is that very slow burn. It's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of learning about the past. But it builds and it builds and it builds. It's like tension, you know, and then it just snaps at the end. I definitely did not guess the twist of this book, and I think this had the biggest twist of any of the books that I read this year. One thing I really did like about this book is that the therapist, Theo, the main character there that we're following, he gets to meet all these different characters, and you get to see them, you know, through his perspective and kind of get his thoughts on how they act or what he thinks about them. But then Alicia, who is the silent patient, you get to read her diary entries. So then you get to, usually immediately after the chapter after, you get to hear her perspective on the situation. So, you know, Theo might run into this guy, have a conversation, and be like, oh, you know, that dude's really cool, blah, 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 blah. And then in the next chapter, you get to see it from Alicia's perspective when she knew said person, and then you see her side and you're like, oh, that's not what I thought. And it kind of goes back and forth of that with characters, and you get to see all different sides, and you really get to form your own opinion, and I like that. It kind of reminded me of the movie The Hateful Eight, where no one is good, everyone could be evil, someone could be up to something. This book does that. Every character in here is not perfect. They're all up to something. Someone could be involved in something, and you're just trying to figure out, you know, the mystery of what really happened that night and why she's being silent. So, you know, a great book. I definitely recommend it. If you're into slow burns, this is the one. If you're not, this one is worth it just because of the ending alone. So great book, check it out. 2025 reminded me of why I fell in love with reading in the first place. And I feel like if reading ever starts to feel like homework for you, hopefully this video helps you out. I had got to that point and I had stopped reading for a while, but just getting back into it and picking books that I like and genres that I like, it's becoming fun. In fact, I did more reading this year than I did playing video games or watching movies or, you know, binging my favorite albums. And I had just as much fun reading the books as I did the other years doing those things. All right, so what was my book of the year? Well, coming in at third place is Red Rising. It was a great book. I love it. The action was so good. Like I said, I'm not going to go into a deep dive. I will do that on the review, but it's such a good book. If you like sci-fi and fantasy and, you know, fast-paced and all that, it's just a good book. I really recommend it, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Coming in at number 2 is The Whisper Man. This one was really close for me. Again, like I said, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was really good. It was a really good page-turner. I really liked the story. I really liked the characters, and I just wanted to keep reading. I was sad that it was over, honestly. But I am glad that they are making it into a movie, and hopefully that's just as good. And then for number 1, drum roll please, it's Razorblade Tears. Of course it would be. It was so good. It had no business being that good. It is one of the best books that I've ever read in my life. Easily my favorite book that I read this year, and I think it's going to be a hard book in general of any genre to beat for me. It was really good. It was really personal. It was the only book that pulled out those kind of emotions in me this year. There you have it. Here's all the books that I read this year. If you enjoyed this video, let me know what your favorite book was, and I'll see you guys on the next one.